I came as a backpacker. I was very explorative. I never had a vision. And it's become such a hallmark of Sapa as the space, but it was absolutely useless in terms of spending money. DNA, the accountants that we have now, they looked at my Excel sheets and they were just like, we don't understand. Your team is the most important. Your ingredients, your vendors, second important. Then third is definitely your landlord, and then you have the government. Being a mother and being a business owner give me the biggest sense of identity and the biggest satisfaction, and they're the hardest. I have a really good therapist who used to run a really large team herself in a different field. So she's kind of a businessman mentor. What if the cloud breaks down?
Oh my God, don't ask questions like that. I won't sleep and
what?
Nobody will sleep.
Everything is on the cloud.
3, 2, 1. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you have imagined.
And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work.
Courage is not doing things in the absence of fear. Courage is doing things despite the fear.
Growth comes from consistent action.
And you're realizing, hey, I'm not the only one with these problems.
Welcome to the BYOB podcast, Dina. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me. Very exciting.
Thank you so much for making it all the way from Mysore to come over to have this conversation. I don't think we've had anyone come from another city for this conversation yet, because earlier we used to, if there was someone in another city, we'd do it virtually. But we really wanted to start having in-person conversations. So thanks for making the trek.
My daughter asked me, why are you doing this in Bangalore? Couldn't you have done this in Mysore?
Oh, was that her instinct as well? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I'll have to meet her and make her, meet her again and make her a friend so that she doesn't hate me too much. Sapa. Can we talk about it? Because it seems to be a bit of a revelation, especially to a lot of people in Bangalore. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, Ayush, yesterday, and I was asking him what his plan for the weekend is, and his mom and him were considering leaving Bangalore at 8 a.m, doing a 2-hour drive, getting to Sapa, just eating at Sapa, coming back. Then he said very sheepishly, we didn't actually end up doing it, but you're getting people to consider a 2-hour trip. How has that started?
We started really, really small, and a lot of things happened very step by step based on what was needed in the moment, I think. And I feel like after the first lockdown, people were looking at what is close by to them that they can discover and explore, rather than, okay, maybe we fly to Sri Lanka or Thailand or Singapore. And they couldn't also. And there was a lot more openness to be like, hey, why don't we figure out what is around Bangalore or around South India that we can explore. Plus, I think people were on social media so much during these few years in COVID that we were suddenly seen. We had a really big platform across all the large cities in India, and people were like, hey, I would really like to go. When I'm in South India, I will try to make it a point to come. And then I guess the highway now also kind of helps. Like there's so many small things that play into it.
Sure.
And I guess some of the charm is that it's not in Bangalore and it's not in the city and it's not available all the time. And that is part of the charm, that you have to make an effort to get it. And I remember in the beginning, and this is Mysore, right? When we were talking about locations, and in Mysore, it doesn't really matter because everything is really close by. But I remember a lot of people were like, Dina, if something is good there, come. Don't worry about location. Right. It's fine. I was like, okay, I'll work with that.
Yeah, I'm so glad it came true, because we all make the effort, and I've made the effort a couple of times, and it's always been such a great experience. I guess I want to go back in our time machines, all the way to not just when Sapa started, but when you decided to come into our culture in India as well. So can you tell us about your journey and what brought you to India? And then we'll talk about a little bit more of your journey with Sapa.
Yeah, so I came as a backpacker 9 years ago. And I really wanted to extend my gap year more and more, explore more things beyond Europe. I think in Europe you tend to live in a bubble, even though maybe somewhat aware of a few things in the global world, but also not aware of what life can be like if you're not from Europe or if you're not white, or try to understand that a little bit. And then I met my now ex-husband, and I stayed on. And I mean, that was like a huge journey. Then if you actually move somewhere and you integrate yourself into another family, and you become part of a neighborhood, and you start to build a new friends circle. And now, of course, with Mata also, she has both cultures in her, and how a child relates in a community is so different to how adults relate in a community. So you have to learn a lot of things. And I think I feel like it's very enriching. And I consider this home. Mysore is home. And if I'm in Germany for a few weeks, I start to miss Mysore in India.
Wow.
And I'm very attached, I think.
By the sounds of it, you intend to stay in Mysore in India for a while longer? Like it is where you are settled, quote unquote?
Yeah, I've been in Mysore for 7 years. And then obviously there was a lot of like, oh, but if you have a divorce, then you can do anything, right? There's less reason. And then I was like, yeah, but I'm very happy here. I don't think I need to go anywhere else. So it was very clear that nothing else will change. Like my work, my whole identity, my friends, my home in Mysore, that is all, I think, I'm very, very settled there.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but do you speak the local language as well, the regional language?
I understand a bit of Kannada, so I usually know what people talk about in the kitchen and what's the general...
And do they know you know?
Yeah, like I'll answer, and then sometimes they're like, oh, why did you answer? You know, like I didn't say that in English. I speak a little bit of Tamil, very, very bad Tamil, because my ex-husband is Tamil. Yeah. And I guess then I try to get by, but I feel like I should definitely learn Kannada because I've been here for so long and it's a bit shameful. And my friends also sometimes shame me for it.
You've made me feel very ashamed because I have not even made an effort to learn Kannada.
Oh,
and I have been living here for a long time.
That's my cheap excuse, you know, that so many Indians don't learn the language.
100%. I am so bad at it. In fact, you asked me today, just before this chat, whether I was born over here.
Yeah.
And my instinct is always to say, no, I was born in Bombay. Because I want an excuse to not know Kannada. Yeah. So to be like, listen, I'm not originally from here, so I can get by. But I must say, I was also, I'm sure there were a bunch of stereotypes in my head, but I was very shocked when I heard you speaking in Tamil as well, because at the time you did. And I was like, what is happening right now? Yeah. It was all a little bit shocked. But it's amazing that you've integrated so beautifully within the culture, and you think of this as home, so that's really nice. Can we talk a little bit about how Sapa as a concept came into your mind? So when did you actually give us a little bit of color around when the idea to launch really came to your mind and when you started? I want to know about those initial few steps, because quite a few of the people listening in are not just entrepreneurs right now, but they're on the cliff right now, deciding whether they want to go for it or not. So if you can tell us a little bit about your journey from the cliff to taking the leap, that would be awesome.
So I was pregnant, and after Mata was born, I had kept on baking from home for very few people who would order bread. So the few people that knew, they would kind of order bread from me. So I kept baking throughout that phase. And then people always gave me this image that in Mysore, this new concept of a bakery would not fly.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, if you don't think it works, I still want to practice more. I want to teach myself more skills and techniques in baking. And I had a mill, and I was milling different grains and trying different sourdough techniques and different pastries. So the idea was that I have a studio kitchen that I can use to enhance my own skill, and then I will go to the tier 1 cities and teach workshops. That was the that was the plan.
So it was initially it was an education based idea with the skill.
Yeah, and then
learn yourself,
whatever I experiment with, this is what I would put on the weekly menu on Thursdays and Saturdays for people to come and pick up. So I felt like it's win-win. Everybody wins. I'm not financially dependent on a small market in Mysore, and I can go to the larger cities and teach. And for the first year, I think that kind of brought me through financially. I could pay everything through the classes.
And I'm just going to pause you here because I want to understand the mindset at the time. Were you thinking about this as the initial steps for a business, or was it just to fuel your learning, fuel your passion? That's what it was.
Yeah, it was very explorative. I never had a vision.
Okay.
It was always explorative and what felt right as the next small step.
Okay.
And then when this model of we have a weekly menu and people can walk in twice a week, and that really exploded and people were lining up and asking me how to join the WhatsApp group, I was like, okay.
Something's happening.
Yeah, maybe this is not so off the path in Mysore, and maybe we can do something here. And I think I always look at hospitality as something very holistic. I don't see, okay, now you have made an eclair and you're done. I want people to feel welcomed. I want people to sit and feel great. Even if they come alone, I want people to enjoy themselves and crave for that to come back. So that is also one of the reasons why we were never big on deliveries, because I look at this holistic experience when you come to Sapa. And the house owner in that building where we were then, he did not want a lot of traffic. He didn't want a signboard. He didn't want seating. So it was very clear that if I want to evolve in my vision of what good hospitality means to me, then I need to move. And then a friend of mine had bought a new property, and he was like, why don't you take a part of this property? I'll let you renovate it however you like. And it's a small part. It felt like financially it's not a crazy responsibility if it fails.
Okay.
It's 5 tables. So I was like, okay, that's manageable. I'll jump.
So when you said, it's not financially crazy, did it mean at that time, were you thinking about it as from your personal investment, or was it from, hey, I've earned some money from what I was doing with the Sapa walk-ins and, people coming in, and so you were reinvesting that? Or was it that was there for lifestyle and now it's a personal investment for you?
Yeah. At that time it was still so small. That would have taken really long to get enough revenue to reinvest in that. But it was I felt like, obviously great privilege to have to be like, okay, chuck it, I'll just try. And if it doesn't work out, well, then it's too bad, but it happens.
And how long did you go from thinking about making the leap to actually making it to the 5-table space? Was it really quick and, okay, screw it, let's go for it? Or did you spend time deliberating and open your calculator a bunch of times and do the math? What type of decision maker were you at the time, at least?
It's a spectrum flow, I would say. I saw a few properties, calculated a few times, then saw what other places were opening up in Mysore, compared rents. So it took me a few months, but then I think I'm also quite okay with risk, I think.
So at this point, did you start thinking about it as a business as opposed to a passion project that you're doing that might make some money as well? So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was like a week before lockdown, so it was smashed really
Okay,
early.
right, okay. So hold on. So if I get the timelines right, the 5-table space that you took over was a week before lockdown.
It was finished. We opened a week before lockdown.
Oh my God.
Like, I think Sabco had the same. There were a few of us that kind of opened in that week.
Wow, okay. So
Yeah.
what the hell did you do then? Like, what happens after week 1 when the lockdown starts? What's going through your mind? What the hell do you do?
I kind of looked at it, okay, like 2-3 years, right? Like this kind of investment is a responsibility for at least 2-3 years. And I was like, okay, now I guess that plan does not necessarily, everything was up in the air, right? What happens in the world? What are structures of moving? And then I started talking to my parents and my parents' friends, and then my parents' friends started this crowdfunding for us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they were all beating the drums that, hey, we don't want this to fail. We saw you in the last year work so hard. Your parents have told us everything about what you did, and now this is happening. We started crowdfunding, and they all pulled together, and that kind of brought us through.
And they initiated this without you requesting for it?
Yeah.
Or they just went,
Yeah.
okay, we want to... How did that make you feel?
That was
must have
amazing.
been... Yeah.
And these were like neighbors that you kind of grow up with, that since you're a child, but you're not necessarily thinking of the relationship that close. And then for those people to be like, no, we will support you and we'll make sure this doesn't die out now. That was amazing.
Wow. So that brought you through the lockdown?
The first lockdown, yeah.
Wow,
because I didn't fire anybody. I baked by myself. I kept on baking alone, but everybody else was at home. And I was able to keep paying everybody. And then I baked on my own and figured, a lot of ingredients were very hard to get. We had to deliver ourselves. So it was very, gotta go and do it yourself. Go back to how you started last year. Do it all on your own.
And at that point in time, did doubts creep in? Was it really hard to keep going? Or was it a roll your sleeves up and let's go?
Yeah. I really enjoyed it, actually. I like working on my own. It's weird, but I think the first lockdown also didn't feel as serious in India, I think, to me, at least. The second lockdown felt very different. So the first lockdown was still like, I can surf this, I can figure, I like doing my own thing. I love having this very direct relationship with the customers. And they were so happy that they could still get things twice or thrice a week.
Got it. And do you see now the people you serve during that time? Are they? I imagine they must be some of your most loyal customers right now.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Some of them became really good friends.
Oh, that's beautiful. And so after the 5-table space, I guess that's what's stuck in my mind now. That I'm calling it the 5-table space. So tell me a little bit about the transition from when you went from there. Did you go from there to what Sapa is right now? So tell me a little bit about that transition. How long did it take? When did you make the decision to move?
After the first lockdown, we started to get really busy. And then at some point it was like, oh man, with this capacity, we are really pushing the boundaries here. We don't have space for packaging material. We don't have space for another oven. Cleaning schedule becomes hard. Taking care, like staff lunch, where are we sitting and eating? There was just no more space, and people were saying, oh, you guys always sell out so early and there's not enough. And there was also such a crowd in a very small cafe that people felt very uncomfortable with because it was COVID.
Right.
So a lot of people stopped coming because it became so crowded. And but I also felt like, man, you don't know, will there be another 5 lockdowns, 6 lockdowns? Like, why would you move if it's so uncertain? And this worked well financially. It was going really well. And there was this really beautiful Art Deco old building that I knew was becoming vacant. And I spoke to the house owner and he told me the rent. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. That's too crazy. Because it's a big building and it felt like a huge step. And
so how many multiples from the previous place was it for rent? Like, what are we talking? Oh, wow. Okay, that's big.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also I knew, because in that place, plumbing was terrible. Electric lines were terrible. Nothing was planned properly. So I was like, okay, now if I do this again, I want all the lines redone. I want all the plaster taken out. We redo the entire wiring, the entire plumbing. We will have a big generator. We will not have issues with power cuts. I want all of that to be set.
Right.
But for such a big building, that's a huge cost. So then even getting contractors to talk about how much this might cost, and then for you to plan, is like a really indefinite gray area that you never know if you can pin something to the actual number. And I was like, okay, no, we're not going to do this. We'll stay put. Second lockdown comes. And again, it's just going crazy and we don't have space and it becomes so hard to work. At some point, again, it was like, okay, now you have to jump.
Okay.
And it's a big investment, and now this is not, okay, for 2-3 years, shalala, I'll try this and it can fail. This cannot fail now. This is not okay. You have to make this work. So it became more and more serious in the first 2-3 years. But also the team was big enough for me to not always be in the kitchen, and they were doing a really great job. So I knew that if I had to be on construction site for 3 days, it would be fine. So I did a lot of this juggling.
So how long was it while you were, for what amount of time were you running the initial setup and working on the
7 months.
7 months?
Yeah.
Wow. And you basically split your time 50-50? Would that be fair? Or
Little more construction, I think.
okay. So suddenly you had to become like a little bit of a interior designer and construction
But
site manager.
I love
Okay.
that. I
You
really
enjoy it. Okay.
enjoy designing and interiors. And the architect and me, we had a very, very good symbiosis of what we want. And she understood what I wanted really well.
Nice.
And she was very able to take a few elements from the building that can be incorporated in the interior design to have this red thread in the design language, like the rounded arches or the rounded corners.
Yeah.
How do we bring this back here and there? So those things were really, really great. And then budget overshot like 3 times.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, right? Even with like a home interiors project, you go over budget by like 50, 70, 90, 100%.
We did
So
300%.
300%. So how, okay. So from being methodical, figuring out your numbers, and then it going 3x, what was that journey like? Was it just but could you see it coming to life and therefore it was like, okay, I know what's happening, so it's fine? Or did it just spiral out of control?
In between, it was like, okay, no, this is more than what I planned for now, but I know that I can't have this looking not great, because everything we stand for is that the quality is great and it's minimalistic, but it's decadent, and I want it to feel a certain way, and I cannot take shortcuts, and I want this to look good for many years, because this is not a 2-year project. So I need to make sure it's good quality, and I need to make sure things are done well. And I need to, we have this pond, right? That was not planned in the beginning, but the architect was like, hey, you have a lot of space, you need to put something. And it was like really expensive.
Let's do a
to
pond.
build that. Yeah. And then she told me the cost, and I was like, but there's no use to it. Why would we spend so much extra on this now? And she's like, but then you have to find something else to put there, and it'll look really nice. And it's become such a hallmark of Sapa as the space, but it was absolutely useless in terms of spending money. So there were those things that I think in the end, like, I'm very glad whatever we did, how we did it, I'm very happy with it. But it just, in the end, was the first few months running it were a little tough with cash flow then.
Sure.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always thought is an entrepreneur's number one job is to just make decisions, right? So that's what you have to do over and over again, whether it's a small one, a big one, a money one, a people one, you're just making decisions all the time. And so eventually we just get used to that's it. And so we take it for granted. What I want to try and understand a little bit is when you have to make biggish decisions, and let's say the pond was a biggish decision, right? Because it's a fairly high investment. What's your go-to way of making a decision? Is it just gut? Is it talking to people? Because I feel like everyone has a different way of getting to a decision. Or do you just know what decision you want to make, so you just make it anyway? What was your way of making the decision?
I think when it comes to like equipment and renovation, even right now, we still reinvest all the time so much because we need more utensils or more small equipments. And the priority is always that it has to run with the ethos of great quality, great hospitality, great product. And we have a communications consulting for etiquette and stuff, and she keeps saying the details make the product. So I'm very willing, I think, to overspend on a few things if that means that everybody in the team has a really good scale that's running. For example, like good scales are expensive, and we have like 6 because they keep saying, Dina, if we only have 3, we have to keep waiting to weigh out stuff. So I don't want them to come to me and be like, we don't have enough equipment. That should not happen in our kitchen. Sure. When it comes to people management and business development, I talk to a lot of people that I find very close, where I know, like, either I trust them as a friend or I feel like they have a lot of experience and they act as a kind of mentor.
So I guess it's different types of decisions mean you make them a little bit differently, right? And your process is different. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the numbers and the financial side of stuff. You don't have to reveal a report now, but I want to walk through the process, right? So you said that the first 3-4 months cash flow was hard. So do you have any, there are quite a few people in our community who are home bakers, chefs, etc., looking to make it to that next level and potentially have a physical establishment. I know that's innately part of their drive, right, to move forward. And so one of the things that would be very valuable to them is to understand whether it was some rules of thumb or whatever you had in place to make financial decisions. So when you say cash flow was tough at the time, can you give us a sense of what you mean by that and how you manage cash flow and things like that when you just started out the physical establishment?
Yeah. I mean, I think your main things that you need to pay every month is rent, salaries, and tax, right? So those you have to pay. And then if you don't have enough money, you can't pay it. And you're like, fuck. Okay, so first priority is salaries. Second priority is rent. Third priority, tax you can pay a little later also. But I feel like it's good to prioritize, okay, which people are the most important, right? So your team is the most important. Your ingredients, your vendors, second important. Then third is definitely your landlord. And then you have the government. That's how I would structure it for me.
Sure.
So if you have to choose who you will pay late, you can go by this priority. For me, that's how I would look at it. In terms of rule of thumbs, I think there's many. They vary slightly, but I think for hospitality, there's quite a few, like rent should be below 8%, salaries should be 25 to 30%, then you have 5% tax. Ideally, material cost should be 35 or less. We are 48 because of our
Going
ingredients.
strong.
Yeah. And then I guess you are aiming at like 15 to 20% profit, right? That's the rule of thumb. And then you can obviously average out every month is slightly different, and there's ups and downs, and you average it out.
Okay, got it.
But you need to be very good with data and bill keeping and have a good accountant, because I'm terrible at it. So
how did you first get over, because now you're talking as though like you've been talking about numbers your whole life, right? Where you're talking about
but
these
it's very
percentages.
superficial. I think if you talk to some people who run hospitality businesses, they're business people. They know like dairy this much percent back, and I don't know so detailed.
But you know enough to make important decisions.
I think so.
So how did your journey start? Was it your first instinct was, I can't do it, let's go get an accountant? Or did you like try and do it on, open an Excel yourself and figure it out initially? What was your journey like?
I tried to figure it out with Excel, and then I was just really bad with Excel. And I know that Excel is not rocket science, and I know that I can figure it out because I have that much confidence in me, but I just feel like it's so inefficient when I do it. And then when you prioritize your tasks, it just keeps on falling to the least important one because it's so much effort for so slow results. Yeah. So you keep on prioritizing other things. And then I went through a number of really not satisfactory accountants. And then I got these accountants that we're still working with that are doing great. And now they're doing a lot of hospitality businesses because I think they need a different kind of support from accountants.
Sure.
And I spoke to other businesses as well that were really kind to help me, like Abhijit from Pizza Bakery. He showed me some of their, like what programs they use, and it's very helpful for people who run larger businesses to just talk you through things a little bit.
Yeah.
And these the DNA, the accountants that we have now, they looked at my Excel sheets and they were just like, we don't understand your Excel sheets. And we have to redo everything from scratch. And that was a lot of work for them. But I think now there is an idea. But I still feel like you're constantly running behind data. Yeah. You're always like, okay, this is not digitalized well. This is not catalogized well. I don't know how you
Cataloged?
Cataloged well.
Is that it? I don't know. Maybe.
Categorized, cataloged well. I don't really know this, and this. Or like sometimes, what if the cloud breaks down?
Oh my God, don't ask questions like that. I won't sleep and
what?
Nobody will sleep.
Everything is on the cloud. Like all the documents, all the rest of everything. What happens then?
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really useful for people looking to make the transition because it's a good starting point, right? To know like these are my headline numbers. This is what I sort of need to know. So that's really kind of.
The accountant's also really honest with me. Like they are more into numbers and they push me, which is really good. Like, I actually think being an entrepreneur is also a lot about self-knowledge. So if you know that you are not good at something, then you need somebody who will push you in that, or who will hit your finger sometimes, because you will not do it.
Yeah, because you might even not know that you're not doing it well.
Yeah. Or you're avoiding it, and you need somebody to be like, hey, this is not correct. You can't do this.
Yeah. So now that we've talked a little bit about what is not your strength, I'd like to talk a little bit about what I call entrepreneur superpowers, right? So I think every entrepreneur comes in with their own superpowers.
Okay.
And this idea that every entrepreneur has to have these exact same skills, I don't buy it at all. You figure out your style, right? So I want you to brag a little bit. And I want you to tell us a little bit about what are one or two of your superpowers that you think you lean on consistently as a business owner, right? I know on like numbers, you said you've got support, but what are like a couple of things you know you've got and you make that the sort of centerpiece of the business?
I think conceptualization.
Okay.
Like a creation that is evolving as a concept and that represents something that really matters to me, and being able to communicate that to the outside. That's one thing. So I feel like I can conceptualize an idea, the story, why it is important to me, and how that should feel like.
Got it.
In hospitality.
Yeah.
I think I can do that well, and I like doing that. I think I'm very reflective, and I like to observe dynamics between people and groups.
Okay.
I'm quite interested in how people function, how I function, how I can learn and change and adapt. And I look at this relationship that I have with Sapa as identity and growth, not through freedom of I'm my own boss and I can do whatever I want, but the opposite. It's responsibility and duty. And because of that, you're forced to learn, and you're forced to evolve, and you're forced to look at yourself and how you interact with that responsibility. And I find that really interesting. And I think we had a very long discussion recently with friends, like where does identity come from? And I feel like the strongest freedom cutters, being a mother and being a business owner, give me the biggest sense of identity and the biggest satisfaction, and they're the hardest. But they are also the most meaningful, and they teach you things that nothing else can teach you. So I think I look at it that way, and that brings me through the hard times because I can relate to it in that way.
Sure. So it's very clear that you reflect very deeply about, I guess, your role, your why. When you talked about the dynamics piece, I'm interested, and so I'm going to probe a little bit further, because it sounds to me like, for a minute I was in a sociology lecture / seminar where we're having this discussion, right? So I want to probe a bit further. Can you give me an example or a moment where you are exploring that dynamic or observing it, your role in it? Can you give us a little bit more?
I mean, one example is you have a sub-team and there's a change in leadership. What happens? How does that change in leadership happen? How much should I involve myself? Should I not involve myself? What does me coming in, saying something in front of everybody do to the group dynamic versus me taking somebody aside and saying something? How much does somebody need directive feedback versus suggestive feedback? Some people need very, very clear feedback. I'm not so good with being directive.
Right.
I work very well with being suggestive. So I know that I work really well with people who are a little bit reflective themselves, who like to take their own decisions to some extent, and who want to reflect together with me and what decisions they've taken and how they can become better. In that dynamic, I function really well.
And so do you hire accordingly? Because you will...
Okay. But hospitality is terrible to hire right now. So I really try, but I think I get a sense fairly quick as to, can I work with this person? on very good levels. And I think right now that we have this team leader structures who take care of their teams works really well for me personally, because I'm not so good directively, but I'm very good suggestively. So I can tell them, this is the frame where you can move. Whatever you do in this frame is up to you. I'm okay with it.
Sure.
And then it's on them how they deal with their own team dynamics. And then, of course, I'm there to help and suggest and assist, or if I observe something, of course, I course correct sometimes. But those dynamics are very interesting to me.
How do you discover something like that about yourself? Do you journal? Do you write? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you read books which have this and you go, oh, wait, that's, what I'm doing? Or is this just pure observation and it just clicks at some point?
I mean, I observe a lot. And then when you hear something, then it clicks, right? Because you're like, oh, yeah, I've seen this. Or now I also just feel I have really amazing, especially female friends that are a little older to me, that are doing amazing work in their fields. And it's great conversation. So just yesterday, I spoke to a very good friend of mine who was referring to, what is it? Great candor versus ruinous empathy.
Radical candor.
Radical candor.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I can totally see myself being ruinously empathetic a lot, and I need to work on that. So then sometimes if somebody introduces a concept to you, you're like, yes,
I get it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then you start to reflect even more, and it's amazing.
That's really interesting. We actually have one of our core values at Jigsaw is radical candor.
Yeah.
It's like one of our 6 core values. And I went through the same journey, going through myself as a leader and realizing that quite often I end up in this ruinous empathy block, and I really don't want to, right?
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have a term or a concept that sort of acts as a guide a little bit and makes it a bit more real.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you just had that conversation.
And actually, I have a really good therapist who used to run a really large team herself in a different field. So she's kind of a businessman mentor when I need her, which also I just feel so lucky.
Yeah, of course. You've hit the lottery.
Yeah, like she used to run one of the biggest publishing houses in Europe before she became a psychologist. So, I mean, it's great. I can discuss a lot of dynamics with her.
Okay, got it.
She was, this is years back, she was the first one who was like, okay, Dina, your business is big enough. You need to start to have weekly meetings, and I was like, okay, cool.
Weekly meetings, that's a good thing. Yeah.
I never thought of that, but I'll do it. And then you keep on improving, right?
It's really interesting because we've had quite a few people on this podcast, and it's getting more and more prevalent that people are sharing actively in this conversation that therapy is one of the tools that they use and one of the outlets that they have.
Yeah.
And can you just tell me a little bit about what your perspective on therapy is and how it's helping you? Like, what do you think of it as? What role does it play for you?
I have never had many different therapists, so I've only had one. So I don't have a lot of comparison points.
Sure.
I like to believe that what my therapist is telling me is I do not really have a problem with anything, so I can call her whenever I need. So she's not like, oh, this is a childhood memory that we need to resolve. It's never that. It's okay, if you have something to talk about, you call me. And she's very in the moment, but it calms me down a lot. And she is, I think if I can gauge her right, she's a bit more old school. So she will not talk about trauma a lot or toxicity. She doesn't talk about this. And sometimes she's like, Dina, if you're dealing with a bully, you have to be a bully too,
Right.
Which is also truth in business sometimes. There are times when somebody is just behaving obnoxious. You can't be thinking that, okay, now by great communication, this person is problem-solving oriented. They are not. So sometimes it's a really good, I think, eye-opener because she has business experience. But most of the time, it just makes me very calm. It gives me a few very, very easy things to integrate or work on. and then I can
Yep.
progress with that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's so important, whether it's therapy or something else, that everybody has some outlet that ends up with them feeling calm and centered, because then they're more likely to make better decisions, not be in their head about something, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We've talked a lot about like deep stuff, so we like to throw a segment in here we call Jaldi with Jigsaw, which is just a little bit of like fun rapid fire questions. So maybe that'll help us take a little bit of the seriousness out of the conversation, and then we can conclude with a couple of questions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
What is the most adventurous thing on your bucket list?
I want to be bald one day.
What?
Yeah, once.
What's the most bizarre business idea you've ever heard of, whether it's a real business or just somebody with an idea?
I actually don't know.
No? Can I tell you mine in the meanwhile? So I don't know if you've seen this episode on Shark Tank a long time ago, where a guy just came in and sold potatoes. Okay. And his business was, we let you put a name on a potato and send it to someone. And that was it. Wow. It got investment and it became $1 million business because it was a gag gift. Yeah. People would just buy like potatoes with the word Dina. And, I remember watching that episode and going, what's the point of my mission and my passion and all of these wonderful things if I could just do that? Okay, what's your guilty pleasure movie or TV show?
A German crime series, Tatort. It's every Sunday, 8:15.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Since the 60s.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a go-to productivity hack, or what do you do when you're overwhelmed with work? What's your go-to?
Run.
Okay. If you needed to swap your life with a fictional character, who's fictional? Which fictional character would you like to be?
There's a really beautiful book. It's called Ink Blood, I think. It's a guy who and his daughter who, if they read a story, they can read characters out of the book into the real world, and they can read themselves into any book. It's a beautiful story.
Wow, that
and it's a
awesome.
very complicated, dark, medieval thing that they get entangled in, but it's really beautiful.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. I'm going to check that out. Thank you. If you could give your past self one piece of advice, and I'm going to say that the past self is day one of Sapa, right? What would you tell them?
Don't be so attached, I think. Yeah.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
I restarted learning violin, so I think
Oh, really?
Go for
That's
that.
my favorite instrument in the world. That's so
nice.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
What is your favorite word that you've learned in another language apart from English?
I mean, recently the word kalas came up. I really like kalas.
Kalas as in over?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, finish.
Oh,
Okay, nice.
but I guess that could. Ulta.
Ulta is a
very
good one.
nice.
Ulta is a fun
Yeah.
one. Okay, nice. What's the weirdest combination of two foods that you like together?
Like a bolognese ragu with sweet rice pudding. Very weird.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay, wow, that is weird
Yeah,
for sure.
that's
Okay,
it.
cool. Perfect. You smashed it.
Yes.
Good, quick answers. Thank you. I guess I've just got one or two final questions for you to wrap up the conversation. The first of which is, so what now? So what's next with Sapa? What's 2024 about or beyond? What are your big plans in the space?
I still think I'm trying to figure out. There's many forks ahead, and I'm still trying to figure out. I definitely want to, in terms of creative work, I'm really, really bored of modern French pastry. I find it very annoying that everybody's doing eclairs and mousse cakes and croissants, and nobody's going beyond it. Even breads, it's all American French. It's not much beyond that. And I feel like the traditional German pastry or Italian pastry has a lot that nobody is talking about. So I want to explore that, especially like countryside, regional techniques and recipes. That's creatively. Then in terms of business, I'm still trying to decide. I am quite sure it'll not be okay, now let's just replicate this and go where the money is. Very sure it's not going to be that. But there has to be some kind of evolution and stepping forward. Like I can't become stagnant. But I'm still trying to figure out.
So Sapa and Bangalore is not happening?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Cool. I'll just keep making the 2-hour trip.
Yeah,
Thank
please
you.
do, please.
Okay, cool. And I guess my final question that I had is, if there's someone who is listening in and has never heard of, never seen Sapa, okay, and you need to invite them to Sapa, what do you say to invite them to Sapa?
We love hosting people, and we want you to feel very, very warm and welcomed. And please come on your own and experience the space and just have a coffee and get that whole experience of the place and the pastries and the food, or come with like a bunch of people and have like a really fun lunch and then go about your weekend. I think there's different ways in which you can come and experience Sapa, but it's really a passionate, big team that is trying to put this together for you to come and enjoy.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And I did it the second way.
Yes.
I think on
Fun lunch.
Yeah, I did the fun lunch,
Yes,
which was extremely
did.
good. I'll now have to figure out how to do
With a book.
Yeah, with a book.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for making the time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being generous with, what you've learned so far. I think that's really valuable for people listening in.
Very
So,
great questions. I love the questions.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Thank you.
Nice.
So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. We're Jigsaw Thinking, home of the self-starters. If you're interested in being your own boss, head to jigsawthinking.com or drop us a DM at Jigsaw Thinking on Instagram.